Ladies and gentlemen, President Trump has officially had enough of the European Union's anti-American antics, and so now the gloves are coming off. And so, to give you guys a better idea of what exactly I'm talking about, take a look at what President Trump himself had to say about the European Union just yesterday afternoon. The European Union, which was formed for the primary purpose of taking advantage of the United States on trade, has been very difficult to deal with. Their powerful trade barriers, VAT taxes, ridiculous corporate penalties, non monetary trade barriers, monetary manipulations, unfair and unjustified lawsuits against American companies, and more, have led to a trade deficit with the U.S. of more than $250 billion a year, a number which is totally unacceptable. Our discussions with them are going nowhere. Therefore, I am recommending a straight 50% tariff on the European Union starting on June 1st, 2025. There is no tariff if the product is built or manufactured in the United States. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So yeah, like I said, President Trump is done dealing with the European Union's insane behavior. And so, folks, we have a lot to break down here, but before we do, I want to say real quick that if you guys enjoy the daily news updates, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. But okay, check this out. Very clearly, the European Union has a sense of entitlement that makes them almost impossible to work with. Their expectations during these trade negotiations are completely out of touch with reality. But what President Trump finds most unacceptable is that they expect America to continue accepting the short end of the stick. And so this is why he's going to impose a flat 50% tariff on European products in around a week if the European Union doesn't get a grip with reality, because they've been ripping us off for decades now, while also acting like we should feel honored for the privilege of doing business with them. Newsflash for the European Union, President Trump is back in office, and so the days during which they got to rip off the USA while also acting like a bunch of entitled children have come to an end. And you'll also notice President Trump noted that the best way to be exempt from his tariffs on the European Union is to just manufacture your goods here in America, which incentivizes domestic manufacturing, further strengthening American jobs and American economic independence. And so the reality is, the European Union has been taking advantage of the American economy for decades now, but President Trump has completely exposed their unwillingness to negotiate in good faith. When President Trump implemented his Liberation Day tariffs in early April, he actually gave the European Union a 90-day pass so that they could try to work out a new, mutually beneficial trade relationship with the United States. However, right now, we're over halfway through that 90-day pass, and the European Union has still totally refused to work with President Trump to build a new, fair, and equal trade deal. So the truth is, President Trump really did give the European Union a solid chance to sincerely come to the negotiating table, but in their hubris and ego, they've completely squandered that opportunity. And so now, President Trump has finally had enough. In fact, take a look at this clip from just yesterday afternoon. Let it play.
I've been saying to everybody, they've treated us very badly over the years. It was formed in order to hurt the United States, in order to take advantage of the United States, and they've done that. We have a big deficit with them. They sell millions and millions of cars, as you know, Mercedes and BMW and Volkswagen and many others, and we were restricted from, essentially restricted from selling cars into the European Union, which is not nice. And I just said it's time that we play the game the way I know how to play the game. You know, they've taken advantage of other people representing this country, and they're not going to do that any longer. Yeah.
There you have it. And so, like we've said, folks, President Trump is done allowing the United States to get ripped off by the European Union. Now, President Trump also accused the European Union of being a strictly anti-American entity, which is pretty much entirely true. Formally established in 1993, for over 30 years now, the European Union has aimed to unify Europe so that it can stand collectively up against the American economy on the global scale, because as you all know, all of the European countries individually don't stand a chance. In fact, check this out. The European Union consists of 27 individual countries, but their collective GDP is still 50% less than the United States GDP. But even more embarrassingly for the European Union, they have a total of 450 million people between all of their member nation countries, whereas in the USA, we only have 350 million people. So the European Union is a collective of 27 countries with 100 million more people than the United States, with a GDP that's 50% smaller than ours. But despite all of these embarrassing metrics, they still think that they get to run the show and boss around the United States. So yeah, once again, now that President Trump is back in the White House, that is not how things work anymore. But you know what? As it would turn out, this whole coalition of 27 countries thing that the European Union is doing might actually, ironically, be the European Union's single biggest problem. In fact, check this out.
A moment. I mentioned June 1st is 9 days away. Is there an opportunity for negotiations in these 9 days?
Well, I'm not going to negotiate on TV, but I would hope that this would light a fire under the EU, because, Bill, I've said before, EU has a collective action problem here. It's 27 countries, but they're being represented by this one group in Brussels. So some of the feedback that I've been getting is that the underlying countries don't even know what the EU is negotiating on their behalf.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. The reality is, the European Union's 27-nation structure is completely dysfunctional and does nothing other than hinder effective trade negotiations. Who would have thought? A massive legislative bureaucracy is actually totally inefficient and counterproductive. And so this is why President Trump's tariffs on European products are actually so important. Not only are they in accordance with our America First agenda, but they also have the potential to make the European Union realize just how incompetent and inefficient they've really become. Seriously, their bloated bureaucracy has become such a nightmarish problem that now they can't even properly negotiate a trade deal anymore. It's insane. But so folks, here's the truth. Regardless of what the European Union decides to do, we can be confident that over here in the United States, we will continue to put America first. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap up, I do want to say real quick that we officially have a Morse News Twitter page as well as a Morse News Facebook page. So if you use either of those platforms, please go down below and drop a follow in order to get breaking news updates that relate to everything we talk about here in the YouTube videos. But everyone, that is going to be a wrap for today's video, so please go down below and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. Please like the video while you're down there, and like I said earlier, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. Thank you all very much for tuning in today, and of course, as always, stay safe.